At my grandpa's funeral, my family smiled and said, "I got nothing." Then I found his real will. I walked into court with it. My sister's face when she lost everything was unreal. So there I was, standing in this stuffy funeral home that smelled like cheap flowers and disappointment, watching my grandpa's casket get lowered into the ground. The whole thing felt surreal, you know? Like I was watching someone else's life play out in front of me. Grandpa Joe had been my rock for 28 years, the one person in my family who actually gave a darn about me. The service was your typical small-town affair. Pastor Williams droning on about eternal rest while half the town showed up to pay their respects. Grandpa had been one of those guys everyone knew, ran the local hardware store for 40 years, helped anyone who needed it, never missed a Sunday, at church. Real salt-of-the-earth type, if you catch my drift. After we got back to Mom and Dad's house, everyone was doing that awkward post-funeral thing where you eat casseroles and pretend like everything's normal. I was nursing a Coke in the kitchen when my parents cornered me. Mom had this weird look on her face, like when she used to tell me I couldn't go to sleepovers because we couldn't afford the gas money. "Honey, we need to talk about Grandpa's will," Dad said, loosening his tie. He'd been acting strange all week, avoiding eye contact and stuff. My stomach dropped. I mean, Grandpa had always told me he was leaving everything split between me and my sister Emily, the house, his savings, everything. We'd talked about it just last Christmas when he was showing me around his property, pointing out where he wanted to put in that vegetable garden we'd planned together. "What about it?" I asked, even though I already knew I wasn't going to like the answer. Mom cleared her throat. "Well, sweetheart, it seems your grandfather changed his mind about some things near the end." The way she said it, all careful and measured, made my skin crawl. Emily walked into the kitchen right then, and I swear she looked guilty as heck. Couldn't even look me in the eye. "He left everything to Emily," Dad said. "Just like that. No sugarcoating, no explanation. Just boom. Your sister gets the house worth 200 grand, the 300,000 in savings, and you get squat." I felt like someone had sucker punched me. "That's impossible. Grandpa would never do that. We literally talked about this stuff all the time." Emily finally spoke up, her voice all shaky. "Maybe he just realized I was the more responsible one. Real nice, right? Kicking me while I'm down at our grandfather's funeral." Mom put her hand on my shoulder, but it felt cold. "Honey, I know this is hard, but your grandfather made his wishes clear. Emily's going to use the money wisely." Wisely? Emily was 26 and had never held a job for more than 6 months. She'd been living off Mom and Dad since college, bouncing between failed relationships and get-rich-quick schemes. Meanwhile, I'd been working as a veterinary technician, saving every penny, trying to build something real. "This doesn't make sense," I said, my voice getting louder. "Grandpa loved us both equally. He told me just 3 months ago that he wanted to make sure we were both taken care of." Dad shrugged. "People change their minds. Maybe he saw something in Emily that convinced him she needed it more." The whole conversation felt wrong. Like really, really wrong. These people raised me, and suddenly they're acting like strangers. Cold, distant strangers who just screwed me out of my inheritance. I left that house feeling like my entire world had flipped upside down. Drove around town for hours in my beat-up Honda Civic, trying to make sense of what just happened. Ended up parking at the Dairy Queen where Grandpa used to take me for blizzards every Friday after school. Update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the support in the comments. I know this is getting long, but trust me, it gets way crazier. Should I have just accepted what my family told me and moved on, or was I right to keep digging? That night, I couldn't sleep. Something about the whole thing was eating at me. Grandpa wasn't the type to play favorites, especially not like this. The man had been sharp as a tack right up until his heart attack. No dementia, no confusion, nothing that would explain such a drastic change. I kept thinking about our last conversation. He'd been sitting on his front porch, drinking sweet tea and watching the sunset. We'd talked about his plans for the property, how he wanted to make sure both Emily and I had enough to start our adult lives right. He'd even mentioned setting aside money for me to finally open that animal rescue I'd been dreaming about since high school. The next morning, I drove over to Grandpa's house. Emily was already there with Mom, going through his stuff like vultures. Made me sick to my stomach, watching them pack up his life into cardboard boxes. "What are you doing here?" Emily asked when she saw me walk in. "This was my grandfather's house too," I said. "I have every right to be here." Mom gave me that look, the one that used to make me feel about 2 inches tall when I was little. "We're just trying to get things organized, dear. Emily needs to figure out what she's keeping and what she's donating. Emily needs to figure out." Like I wasn't even part of the equation anymore. I wandered into Grandpa's study while they were busy in the living room. The old oak desk where he used to pay bills and work on crossword puzzles was still covered with his stuff. Reading glasses, a half-finished puzzle book, and his old metal lockbox that he kept important papers in. I'd seen him open that box 100 times growing up. He always kept the key in the same spot, taped under the bottom drawer. My hands were shaking as I opened it, not really sure what I was looking for. Most of it was the usual stuff. Birth certificates, insurance papers, old photos. But at the bottom, under a stack of utility bills, I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a handwritten note in Grandpa's scratchy handwriting, dated just 2 months before he died. "Final wishes. Split everything equal between both girls. They both deserve a fair start. House and money divided 50-50. Make sure lawyer knows this is what I want." I stared at that piece of paper for what felt like forever. This wasn't some official document, but it was definitely Grandpa's handwriting, and it directly contradicted everything my family had just told me. My hands were literally trembling as I folded the note and stuck it in my pocket. I needed to see the actual will, compare the signatures, figure out what the heck was going on. Find anything interesting? Emily's voice made me jump out of my skin. Just looking at some old photos, I lied, closing the lockbox. She watched me, with this weird expression, like she was trying to read my mind. You know, you should probably accept that Grandpa made his choice. Fighting it isn't going to change anything. Fighting it? I hadn't said anything about fighting anything. Why would she even bring that up unless she had something to hide? That afternoon, I went to see Mr. Peterson, the lawyer who'd handled Grandpa's affairs for years. Nice old guy who'd known our family forever. His office was in one of those converted Victorian houses downtown, the kind with creaky floors and way too much floral wallpaper. "I'm so sorry for your loss," he said, gesturing for me to sit down. "Your grandfather was a good man. Thank you. I was hoping I could get a copy of his will. My family told me about it, but I'd like to see it myself." Something flickered across his face. Confusion, maybe? Of course. Though I have to say I was surprised by some of the changes he made at the end. Changes, that word again. He pulled out a file and handed me several papers. The will was dated just 3 weeks before Grandpa died, which already seemed weird. In all the years I'd known him, Grandpa wasn't the type to wait until the last minute for important stuff, but what really caught my attention was the signature. I'd seen Grandpa sign thousands of things over the years: birthday cards, Christmas checks, permission slips when I was a kid. His signature was always this distinctive, shaky scrawl that looked like a seismograph during an earthquake. This signature was too neat, too controlled. It looked like someone had been practicing. "Mr. Peterson, does this signature look right to you?" He squinted at it through his glasses. "Well, your grandfather was quite ill near the end. Sometimes that can affect handwriting." "Maybe, but Grandpa's heart condition shouldn't have made his handwriting suddenly neater and more controlled. If anything, it should have made it shakier." I thanked Mr. Peterson and left, my mind racing. Everything about this situation felt wrong, but I needed proof. Real, solid proof that would hold up if I decided to challenge this thing. Update. The evidence is starting to pile up, guys. I'm getting scared about what I might find, but I can't stop now. What would you do if you suspected your own family had betrayed you like this? That evening, I did something I probably should have done sooner. I called Grandpa's best friend, Walter. They'd known each other for 60 years, served in Vietnam together, played poker every Thursday night until Grandpa got too sick. "Walter, it's me. I wanted to ask you about something." "Course, sweetheart. Your grandpa talked about you all the time. So proud of how you turned out." That hit me right in the feels. "Walter, did Grandpa ever mention changing his will recently?" "My family says he left everything to Emily." There was a long pause. "That's strange. Last time we talked, maybe a month before he passed, he was real specific about wanting to split things fair between you girls. Said he'd been thinking about it a lot, wanted to make sure you could start that animal rescue you'd been dreaming about." My heart started pounding. "You're sure about that?" "Positive. He was worried about Emily, thought she needed to learn some responsibility, but he wanted you both to have the same opportunities, said it wouldn't be right to play favorites." After I hung up, I sat in my apartment staring at the wall for about an hour. The pieces were starting to come together, and the picture they made was ugly as heck. My own family, my parents and sister, had somehow gotten their hands on Grandpa's will and changed it. They'd stolen my inheritance and lied to my face about it, at his funeral no less. The next morning, I called a lawyer, not Mr. Peterson, he was too close to the family. I found Rebecca Martinez through Google, a woman who specialized in estate disputes and had great reviews. Her office was modern and clean, the complete opposite of Peterson's old-school setup. "Tell me what's happening," she said after I explained why I was there. I laid out everything: the weird behavior at the funeral, the note I'd found, Walter's testimony, the signature that looked wrong. She listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. "Do you still have that handwritten note?" I pulled it out of my purse. She studied it carefully, then compared it to a copy of the official will I'd brought. "This is interesting. The handwriting on your note definitely looks different from the signature on the will. We'd need a handwriting expert to be sure, but my gut says you're onto something. So what do I do?" "First, we get a professional handwriting analysis. Second, we look for any other evidence that supports your grandfather's original intentions. Letters, emails, witnesses who can testify about conversations they had with him. Then, if we have enough, we can test the will in probate court." The whole process would cost money I didn't really have, but Rebecca agreed to work on contingency. If we won, she'd take a percentage of whatever I recovered. If we lost, I'd be out the court costs but not her fees. Over the next 2 weeks, I turned into a detective. I went through every piece of paper in my apartment that Grandpa had ever written on: birthday cards, Christmas notes, grocery lists he'd given me when I ran errands for him. I compiled a whole folder of his handwriting samples. The handwriting expert Rebecca recommended was this little old lady named Dr. Sarah Chen, who worked out of a cluttered office near the university. She spent 3 hours comparing Grandpa's real signature to the one on the will, using magnifying glasses and digital scanners and all kinds of equipment. "This is clearly not the same person's handwriting," she said finally. "The pressure patterns are completely different, the letter formations don't match, and the pen strokes show evidence of simulation, someone trying to copy another person's signature." Simulation. That's a fancy way of saying forgery. I also tracked down 2 more of Grandpa's friends who confirmed he'd talked about splitting everything equally. Mrs. Henderson from next door remembered him mentioning it just a few weeks before he died. Tom, Bradley from the hardware store said Grandpa had been excited about helping me start my animal rescue. Meanwhile, my family was acting like nothing had happened. Emily posted pictures on Facebook of herself redecorating Grandpa's house, which felt like a slap in the face. Mom kept calling, wanting to know why I was being so distant. "You're acting strange, honey. We're all grieving, but that's no reason to shut us out." I wanted to scream at her. Instead, I just said I needed some space to process everything. The hardest part was pretending like I didn't know what they'd done. Sitting through family dinners, listening to Emily talk about her plans for her inheritance, watching my parents nod along like they hadn't helped her steal it. But Rebecca said it was important not to tip them off until we were ready to file the court papers. If they knew I was onto them, they might try to destroy evidence or come up with a better cover story. Update: tomorrow's the big day. We're filing the lawsuit. I'm terrified but also excited to finally get some justice. Do you think I'm doing the right thing, or should family loyalty come first? 3 weeks after I'd first walked into Rebecca's office, we filed a petition to contest Grandpa's will. The papers were served to my parents and Emily on a Tuesday afternoon while they were all at Mom's house planning Emily's housewarming party. Emily called me an hour later, absolutely screaming, "How could you do this to us, to our family? Grandpa left me that house because he trusted me." "If that's true, then you have nothing to worry about," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is ridiculous. You're just being greedy and vindictive because you didn't get what you wanted." Mom got on the phone next. "Sweetheart, what's this lawsuit about? Surely we can work this out as a family." "We could have worked it out as a family if you'd been honest with me from the beginning." "Honest about what? Your grandfather made his wishes clear. Did he? Or did you three decide what his wishes should be?" The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. Dad tried the intimidation route. "You better drop this nonsense before it gets out of hand. You're going to embarrass this entire family." "I'm embarrassing the family? I'm not the one who forged legal documents." "You can't prove anything," Emily said, getting back on the phone. "And even if you could, do you really want to destroy our relationship over money?" That was rich, coming from someone who'd already destroyed our relationship by stealing from me. The court date was set for 6 weeks later. In the meantime, the drama in my family reached soap opera levels. Aunts and uncles started calling, wanting to know what was happening. Some took my side once they heard the story, others thought I was being selfish and should just accept the situation. My cousin Jake, who'd always been like a brother to me, was furious when he found out what my parents and Emily had done. "That's messed up, cuz. Grandpa Joe loved you just as much as Emily. No way he would have cut you out completely." But my Uncle Richard, Dad's brother, thought I was out of line. "Family doesn't sue family over money. Your grandfather's gone. Fighting about his will isn't going to bring him back." The worst part was how isolated I felt. These people had been my support system my entire life, and now half of them thought I was some kind of money-hungry monster for wanting what was rightfully mine. Emily tried to get to me through mutual friends, spreading stories about how I was tearing the family apart over greed. She conveniently left out the part about forging Grandpa's signature, but I had Rebecca, and I had the truth, and that had to be enough. The day before the court hearing, Mom made one last attempt to get me to drop the lawsuit. She showed up at my apartment with tears in her eyes and a Tupperware container of chocolate chip cookies, my childhood favorite. "Please, baby girl, can't we find a way to work this out? Emily's willing to give you something from the house, maybe some of Grandpa's tools or furniture." "Mom, this isn't about stuff. This is about the fact that you helped forge his will." "That's a terrible thing to say. We would never do something like that." Then explain the handwriting analysis. Explain why 3 different people remember Grandpa, saying he wanted to split everything equally. She couldn't, of course. Just kept crying and talking about how I was destroying the family. "The family was destroyed the minute you decided to steal from me," I said. "I didn't do this. You did." Court day was surreal. I'd never been in a courtroom before, and it was nothing like the TV shows. More boring, more procedural, more official, I guess. Judge Harrison was this no-nonsense woman in her 50s who looked like she'd seen every kind of family drama imaginable. She listened while Rebecca presented our case, the handwriting analysis, witness testimonies, the note I'd found in Grandpa's lockbox. My family's lawyer tried to argue that Grandpa had been confused near the end, that he'd changed his mind about the inheritance and had every right to do so. But when Dr. Chen took the stand and explained in detail why the signature was forged, you could see the case falling apart. "The evidence clearly shows 2 different hands," she testified. "The pressure, patterns, letter spacing, and pen angle are all inconsistent with the defendant's natural handwriting. In my professional opinion, this signature was simulated by someone attempting to replicate Mr. Johnson's handwriting." Emily was crying in the gallery. Mom and Dad looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. The judge called a recess to review the evidence. When we came back, her decision was swift and decisive. Based on the handwriting analysis and witness testimony presented, I find that the will dated 3 weeks before Mr. Johnson's death contains a forged signature and does not represent his true final wishes. The court hereby invalidates this document and reinstates the previous will, which splits the estate equally between both granddaughters. Emily let out this wail that echoed through the courtroom. Mom buried her face in her hands. Dad just stared, straight ahead like he was in shock. I felt empty. Not happy, not sad, just empty. This should have been a moment of triumph, but mostly I felt like I'd lost my family. Outside the courthouse, Emily confronted me one last time. "I hope you're happy. You got your money, but you lost your family." I lost my family the day you decided to forge Grandpa's will, I said. This is just me getting back what was already mine. She was still crying, mascara running down her cheeks. We needed that money. You have your job, your career. I don't have anything. You could have gotten a job. You could have built something for yourself instead of stealing from me. It wasn't stealing. Grandpa loved me more. If that were true, you wouldn't have needed to forge his signature. That shut her up. The next few months were the hardest of my life. My parents tried to reconcile at first, sending cards and leaving voicemails about how families need to stick together. But when I found text messages between Mom and Emily from before Grandpa died, messages talking about how to handle the will situation and make sure Emily got everything, I forwarded them to the district attorney. Turns out, forging legal documents is a felony. Who knew? Emily ended up pleading guilty to fraud and got 2 years probation plus community service. Mom and Dad weren't charged, but their reputations in our small town were shot. People don't forget when you try to steal from your own daughter. I used my inheritance exactly the way Grandpa would have wanted. Bought a small house with some land outside town and turned it into a rescue for abandoned and abused animals. Called it Joe's Second Chances in his honor. The first dog I saved was this old German shepherd named Duke, who'd been living in a backyard chain for 5 years. Reminded me of Grandpa's old dog, Rex. When Duke got adopted by a family with kids who loved him, I knew I was doing exactly what I was meant to do. Emily lost the house eventually. Turns out she'd been planning to flip it for quick cash, but the legal fees from the lawsuit ate up most of what she did inherit. Last I heard, she was back living with our parents, still unemployed, still blaming everyone else for her problems. My parents sent me a Christmas card last year with a note about how they missed their daughter and hoped we could put this all behind us. I threw it away without reading the whole thing. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt. And honestly, I'm okay with that. The rescue is thriving now. We've saved over 200 animals in the past 2 years, and I wake up every morning, knowing I'm honoring Grandpa's memory the right way. Not by letting people walk all over me, but by standing up for what's right and using the gift he gave me to help creatures who can't help themselves. Sometimes I still think about what might have happened if I just accepted their lies and walked away. Emily would have gotten everything. My parents would have gotten away with fraud, and I'd still be struggling to make ends meet as a vet tech. But I didn't walk away. I fought back. And sometimes, when you fight back against people who've wronged, you don't just get justice. You get a better life than you ever imagined. Grandpa always used to say that the truth has a way of coming out eventually. He was right about that, just like he was right about most things. The animals don't care about family drama or forged wills or court cases. They just want someone to love them and give them a safe place to heal. Turns out, that's exactly what I needed too. So yeah, my family cut me out of Grandpa's will. And yeah, I fought back in court and won. But the real victory wasn't the money or the house or even seeing justice served. The real victory was learning that sometimes the family you choose, the four-legged kind that greets you with unconditional love every single day, is better than the family you're born into. Grandpa would have been proud of what I built with his gift. And in the end, that's all that really matters.